So, dear colleagues, as a point of departure, let me quote two catchy thoughts on the executive power. As already my colleague has mentioned, and as you can see, my presentation centers around the executive power. So I'm going to start my presentation with two thoughts about the executive power. The first one stems from Jacques Necker, who used to be the finance minister for the King Louis XVI. So the executive power is the moving force of a government. It represents in the political system that mysterious principle which in moral man unites action to the will. The second quote is from the American political philosopher Henry Mansfield. His famous book is about taming the prince, about the dilemmas of the modern executive power. The beauty of executive power, would you believe that executive power has its own beauty? It can reach where law cannot, and thus subtly the defect of law yet remain subordinate to law. So you might be a bit tired, but maybe you can get the messages of these two sentences, which in my opinion perfectly highlights the nature of the executive power. So my presentation unfolds as follows. Firstly, I'm going to outline the structure of the executive power in the examined 8 countries. The second part of the presentation is devoted to the government as the key actors of the executive power. And I'm going to pose 3 questions: how to define the government, how to form the government, and finally, how to bring down, how to overthrow the government. And in the last section, I'm going to deal with the territorial level of the executive power. So as a first step, we focus on the structure of the executive power according to the wording of the constitutions and pose the following maybe very simple question: who holds the executive power? We may separate 4 models in the examined constitutions. Firstly, the Polish constitution offers a clear-cut example for the dual executive, since the constitution stipulates that executive power shall be vested in the President of the Republic of Poland and the Council of Ministers. Well, this judgment is rather controversial among the scholars of constitutional law. Some claim that vesting the executive power in 2 separate and distinct entities may give rise to conflicts in the future, and according to some experts of constitutional law in Poland, this double-headed executive is one of the main problems of the current Polish constitutional system. But contrary to Poland, both the constitution of the Czech Republic and those of Slovakia refrain from directly identifying the possessors of the executive power. However, both of these 2 constitutions has a separate chapter on executive power, and both of these chapters include 2 sections. The first for the President of the Republic, and the second for the government. And based on the structure of these 2 constitutions, one may conclude that the President and the government share the executive power. Just to mention, the Czech constitution and also the political landscape has changed dramatically some 10 years ago, when the parliamentary elected president has been replaced by a directly elected president, and this amendment of the constitution triggered some ongoing debates on the role of the president and the putative shift from the parliamentary system to the semi-presidential system. Thirdly, the Constitution of Croatia, the Fundamental Law of Hungary, and the Constitution of Serbia place the executive power solely into the hands of the government. Therefore, the president seems to be out of the executive power, at least in virtue of the constitution, at least based on the wording of the constitution. And finally, Romania and Slovenia form another group, since their constitutions do not regard either the head of state or the government as an organ of executive power, although they do declare the theory of separation of powers. Well, the structure of the executive power brings us to the question of forms of government. As it is widely known, one can distinguish three basic and some other types of forms of government based on the structure of executive power and on the relationship between the executive power and the legislative power. The first one is the parliamentary systems characterized by dual executive system, and the government holds the real political power and is accountable to the parliament, and meanwhile the head of state plays a rather symbolic role, for example, United Kingdom or Germany. And we also have presidential systems where all the executive power is vested in a single directly elected politician, a president, for a fixed term, and who is at least politically not accountable to the legislation. The United States serves as an obvious example. And we have the semi-presidential systems in which the executive is shared by the president and the government, but contrary to the parliamentary systems, the head of state is always directly elected and possesses a considerable amount of power, for example, France. As for the 8 examined states, none of them has institutionalized the presidential system, so we can say goodbye to this configuration and focus on the remaining 2 systems, the parliamentary and the semi-presidential system. At this point, it would be quite logical and perhaps expected by the audience, expected by you, to classify these 8 countries and find the proper label for these analyzed states. However, this task proves to be surprisingly complicated. The reason is the semi-presidentialism, and the semi-presidential system, it's a very traveling concept, and according to the Czech political scientists Brunslik and Kubat, as they note, the literature on semi-presidentialism is full of paradoxes, ambiguities, confusions, and disagreements. To put it another way, it's very challenging to lay down even the basic criteria of the semi-presidential systems. Then how to classify these 8 states? Well, Hungary, having had parliamentary elected head of state from the very beginning, right after the democratic transition, it is the only country to be unanimously regarded as a parliamentary system. For the remaining 7 countries, the situation is more complicated. It's no exaggeration to say that each of these 7 polities has already been described both as parliamentary or semi-presidential system in the literature. However, this fuzzy picture doesn't imply that these 7 countries take the same position on the imaginary parliamentary and semi-presidential scale. Poland and even more perhaps Romania are usually, but not always, but usually regarded as a semi-presidential systems, but it can be, this point of view may be challenged. Meanwhile, Slovakia and Slovenia seem to be closer to the pure form of presidential systems. And Croatia, Serbia, and recently the Czech Republic are rather intermediate categories between the parliamentary and the semi-presidential system. As the political scientist Smiljko Sokol from Croatia introduced the snappy definition of quarter presidential. It means if we have a semi-presidential system, then we may also have quarter presidential system. And so maybe we can place them, these three countries, into this category. Well, let's now move on the government as the key actors of the executive powers. The first question is to examine how to define the government. It's very interesting to compare the constitutions, how they try to grasp the concept of the government. Some of the constitutions include a clear-cut definition, an exact definition for the government. For example, the Constitution of Czechia reads as follows: the government is the highest body of executive power, the fundamental of Hungary, the government is the general organ of executive power, and so on. The second solution, the Polish and the Romanian constitutions do not offer any definition for the government. Instead of that, they establish the function of the government. As you can see, I won't read it in order not to run out of my time. And finally, the Constitution of Slovenia stands out in this respect, since it does not make any attempt to define the government. However, Slovenia has a separate act on the government, and this act, as far as I know, it includes a definition for the government. Okay. Our next question reads as follows: how to form a government? As you may know, in parliamentary systems, the government derives its legitimacy from the confidence of the legislator. So the principle of parliamentary accountability, in other words, responsibility, clearly appears in each of the examined constitutions, although the proper wording varies by a state. For example, the Constitution of Croatia, the government shall be accountable to the Croatian parliament. The government, in Czech Republic, the government is accountable to the Chamber of Deputies, and so on. I won't read this sentence, but you can see that there are some striking similarities between the 8 constitutions, as each of them includes this theory. Just getting back. Okay, so continue. The government formation process is often seen as a 3-stage process: nomination, negotiation, and finally the parliamentary ratification. The process starts with the president in each state, since the head of state is entitled to make a proposal for the prime minister. This is the nomination or resignation phase or stage. Or the president is even entitled to appoint the prime minister. As a general rule, constitutions allow presidents a certain leeway in selecting the prime minister. And just to mention, according to the Constitution of Romania, Serbia, and Slovenia, the president is obliged to have a consultation with the leaders of the parliamentary parties or the parliamentary groups. As noted earlier, in parliamentary system, the government's legitimacy is based on the confidence of the legislative power. But how is this confidence manifested? In some countries, for example in Austria and in the Netherlands, the constitutional rules are of negative form. What does it mean? Negative form, that means that the government must only be tolerated, but no vote of confidence takes place. The government must be tolerated and, of course, can be ousted at any time by a simple vote of no confidence. In contrast, in several countries worldwide, government formation rules are formulated in a positive way. That means that the parliament has to express its confidence by voting. As for the 8 countries examined in our book, the government formation rule is definitely positive, since the government, or in Hungary, the prime minister, has to seek and receive the confidence of the parliament within a so-called investiture vote. This leads us to the next question: when shall an investiture vote take place? Comparing the relevant provisions of the 8 constitutions, 2 basic methods can be distinguished. The first one is the so-called ex post formation vote. So on the one hand, in the Czech Republic, Poland, and in Slovakia, the prime minister gains office from the president, and the appointment of the members of the government take place prior to the vote of confidence, which means that the government come into existence even before the vote of confidence. Well, this process may result in some very strange situations, in very strange, controversial situations. If a government loses the vote of confidence, but remains in office. That was the case with the first government of Andrej Babiš in the Czech Republic. And on the other hand, the constitutions of the remaining 5 countries follow different logic, since the vote of confidence takes place before the final establishment of the government. That's the so-called ex ante formation vote. So now we have arrived to the next question: how to bring down the government? It might be more interesting for you. The withdrawal of confidence may be conducted in 2 different ways: by either a vote of no confidence or a motion of confidence. The motion of no confidence has 2 types, just to make the overall picture more complicated. So the vote of no confidence has 2 basic types: the so-called regular vote of no confidence and the constructive vote of no confidence. As compared with the constructive vote of confidence, the regular vote of no confidence is the simpler and more common form of confidence voting. In this case, once the majority of the MPs supports the motion of no confidence, then the mandate of the government is terminated. And the government formation process starts from the very beginning. Compared to the constructive one, the regular vote of no confidence can be a major source of political instability, especially in a fragmented and deeply divided parliaments. The constructive vote of no confidence requires the legislator to design it a new prime minister upon submitting the motion. Thus, this method allows the parliament to revoke the confidence from the government or from the prime minister only if there is a positive majority for a prospective successor. So once the parliament supports the motion of no confidence, it thereby expresses its lack of confidence in the government or in the prime minister, and in the same moment, either elects the person proposed for the office of prime minister in the motion, or the president is obliged to appoint the proposed person. The constructive vote of confidence is quite a rare phenomenon, since less than 10 constitutions apply this method worldwide, and as you may know, its rationale lies in the fact that it provides a greater degree of stability for the incumbent prime minister, and for the whole government. And briefly, the issue of confidence merely emerges related to the vote of no confidence, but another process must be examined. While the vote of no confidence is based on the motion of the MPs, motion of the parliaments, even the government or the prime minister in Hungary, the prime minister may initiate a vote to reveal whether it still has the support of the parliament or not. Under certain circumstances, the government may be forced to judge its support and call for a vote of no confidence. The risk of the motion is obvious. If the parliament is unable to receive the support of majority of the MPs, then the prime minister has to resign, or the mandate of the government is going to be terminated. And finally, the next, so just to mention, Croatia, Poland, and Serbia authorize this kind of motion only per se, and in the other countries, it's possible to lodge the vote of confidence linked with a kind of proposal, which is very important for the government. And the next slide is devoted to the territorial level of the executive. Although the executive branch is principally attributed to the government and to the heads of state, it has own territorial dimension. Contrary to the legislative power, which can be easily centralized, at least in unitary states, the executive would be unable to function without territorial or local administrative bodies. And I have a table to show you which summarizes the territorial level of the executive. As you can see, each of these countries has established some territorial organs of the government. And finally, it is worth to mention that in Hungary, in Poland, and in Romania, the territorial bodies, the territorial organs of the government has a constitutional rank, so they are mentioned in the constitution. Well, thank you very much. That was my presentation.